Welcome to Arrowhead Addict's Top 50 Chiefs Players of All Time. This time, we are hitting 25 through 21. Fellas, Matt Connor, Adam Best, and myself, Sterling Holmes, we will be breaking this down. Starting with number 25, Ed Budde. Ed Budde, Super Bowl champion, obviously, but he was a 5-time AFL All-Star as well. I know Adam Best can't wait to get to you and hear your thoughts about what was done before he was a legit Kansas City Chief. Just a little rundown as well of where we all put Ed Budde. Matt Connor, you had him at 23. I had him at 27. Patrick had him at 22. Adam Best all the way down at 32, holding true for his hatred for apparently the Kansas City Texans. Best, we'll start with you since you had him at 32, the lowest here. What's up with Ed Budde?
You guys know the drill by now. I had to figure out ways to dock guys, and the AFL was just an easy way. Yeah, you were a Texan. So great player, though. Top 10 pick in both the NFL and AFL. I don't know how many players can say that. The crazy thing is his son was also a first-round pick by the Chiefs in 1980. So I think those are the only two guys that have been father-son top 12 to the same team in NFL history, I believe. I can't think of any other combination. So he wore one uniform around 15 years for the Chiefs and Texans. So gave him a little bit of a bump up for that.
All right, Matt Connor, what do you have here?
Yeah, look, I had him, I think the highest, right? 23 out of all of us. Maybe Patrick did, but we talk about these cornerstone guys that made us hungry for elite level talent at certain positions. And in prior episodes, we've talked about like maybe Christian Okoye sort of like stirring that hunger for like great running backs in a Chief offense that, we kept going through. And then we've mentioned other offensive linemen too, who may have done that, like, with Jim Tyrer or some others. And, Ed Budde's one of those guys. He's responsible for that, for big blocks up front on classic plays for the Chiefs, for those championship appearances, and then the big win under Hank Stram. And he's just 177 games. He's a member of the Chiefs Hall of Fame. There's a missed opportunity here. He should have named his son Budde. I don't know how you don't have Budde, because then you would have had like a truly memorable player.
He would have hit then if his name was Budde.
He would have hit then. And I'll say that when I was a kid, I don't know if you guys, maybe I'm dating myself here. I think I'm older than both of you. But when I was a kid, there was a toy named My Budde, and it was just like a doll you could buy, and he was like just a plush whatever. And it made me like, why are we talking about this with Ed Budde? Except the tagline was like, my buddy, wherever I go, he goes.
Didn't we already sing this song during this? One of these.
Maybe we have, but we haven't talked about Ed Budde.
Dog, what in the 1940s are we talking about right now?
80s gold, man.
I'm trying to say it because the tagline says, wherever I go, he goes. And that's my buddy. And that was true for the Chiefs. Wherever Ed Budde's going, that's where the running back would go. And it was like, maybe that's where they got the tagline. They looked at Ed Budde and they're like, he's my buddy. And wherever he goes, the Chiefs offense goes. That's maybe a stupid way to say it, but it's very true in general that he was that lead cornerstone that would just make the way happen for them. Just one of the all-time greats. I had to put him in my top quarter of Chiefs players.
I had trouble with him because, and I'm interested, Sterling, Matt, if you guys had the same issue. Felt really bad leaving Joe Thuney off the list. How do you compare Ed Budde to Joe Thuney? Because Joe Thuney is 6'5", 305, plays in the modern game, which I think is more difficult.
Yep.
Ed Budde is 6'5", 265. So 40 pounds lighter, probably played at a time that was a little bit easier. I kind of think Joe Thuney is being punished for two things: not being around very long and still being a Chief. If he was already retired, I think he would be on this list. But, maybe if he plays another 2 or 3 years in Kansas City, he's in. I
think that's a pretty bold take. Yeah, he's phenomenal. No one's disagreeing that Joe Thuney might have a higher like ceiling or a better stretch, but it's longevity. Like Ed Budde is one of the guys you point to when you talk about the Chiefs' early days. Like he is what former Chiefs say, oh yeah, it's Ed Budde. Like you can't talk about the Chiefs' history without bringing up Ed Budde. I love Joe Thuney, but he's not as historically important in Chiefs lore as Ed Budde is. Some interesting tidbits on Ed Budde is he played left guard, and he actually put his left hand down instead of the usual right hand. So he lined up basically as a right guard, played left guard, which is a little of an intriguing tidbit about Ed Budde. And he was so good that in 1968, he became the first offensive lineman to be selected by the AP as an offensive player of the week. You know how good you have to be an offensive lineman and be named player of the week?
That's pretty badass.
He's an excellent player, and I had him 10 spots or so above Joe Thuney. But Joe Thuney is the best pass blocking guard in the National Football League. So I just think mentioning him and discussing how hard it was to kind of see him omitted from this list, and also recognizing that Ed Budde deserves to be on this list and kind of paved the way for Will Shields and Joe Thuney. I think it's a fun conversation.
Hey, I'd like to speak to that Joe Thuney thing real fast. I think in a way, Joe Thuney has suffered from a couple things. One is like 177 games for Ed Budde. I mean, if we're going to compare, it's not really a fair comparison. But I think Joe Thuney, like from the beginning, he was like hyper expensive as a guard before guard got hyper expensive in the NFL. And so even though he was playing as a high level, even as recently as like last year, it wasn't hard to find a significant number of people on social media going, hey, maybe we can wiggle out of Joe Thuney's deal at some point soon down the road, without realizing and also he suffers a little bit from Mitch Schwartz syndrome, which is somehow I can't get the postseason accolades despite being a performer on that level. And so it wasn't until, he went through all of his New England years and his first, season or so in KC without any Pro Bowl, right? Am I right? He's like late to that party, like Mitchell Schwartz, where you're like, he's that good, but he's not getting the call.
I have a theory here.
Well, please do. All I'm saying is I think that package together really keeps him from, I think just now Pro Football Focus is going this guy, and I think the Pro Bowl is going this guy, and I think the championships are going this guy, and you're looking at the tackles going, this team's winning Super Bowls and without normally the most celebrated bookends getting that credit. And I think everyone's going, oh, he is the anchor on the front line of an offense that's winning championship. I think now he's getting it, but he's going to have to keep playing to earn that sort of longevity now that he's at that level.
Sterling, you'll love this as an NBA comp. He's getting Horace Granted. When you're playing in the shadow of Michael Jordan and Travis Kelce and Phil Jackson, it's hard to get any buzz of your own. You're playing in the shadow of first ballot Hall of Famers. It's just tough to get. And then throwing Chris Jones.
If he had rec specs, I think we'd all vote him a little higher, though. Let's be real now. All right, going to number 24 on the list of top 50 Chiefs of all time. Derrick Johnson, 24. This was fun. We all had him relatively close. Matt Connor, 27. I had him at 21. Patrick had him 29. Best had him at 27. I'll start with you this time, Connor. Derrick Johnson.
I love it. Who doesn't love DJ? I love everything about DJ, but I think my favorite thing is actually like his downside. That story when Todd Haley benched him for like that lack of effort or whatever was there was that drama. Do you guys remember this? It was like his third season or something. It was like 2010, 2011. You could look, he gets benched. He doesn't make as many starts that season. And Todd Haley basically looked at him and dude, we took you at number 15 overall, first round out of Texas. You're supposed to be some high flying, great, whatever. You're not. He benched him and then made DJ re-earn his starting spot. And it isn't until after that. It was like one of the few things that Todd Haley's tough as nails.
I think it was 09. I think you're looking at 09 right there.
That's it. It wasn't until after that DJ was suddenly became known as this hyper tackling machine, this sure hand. It's not the way any player wants to have to learn, by being embarrassed, by being shamed, and by their, no one has to be in the coach's doghouse to come out of it. But DJ, to his credit, took that challenge, lived up to that challenge, and then put up consecutive Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl following that incident. And so I think that the numbers speak for themselves, career tackling leader, all that kind of stuff. And you guys can get into that. But to me, there's a heart of DJ's story here that says the guy dug deep as a former first round pick who could have maybe not been remembered all so well, found that next level then earned new contracts thereafter with the same team and became an all-time defensive, like we're talking about him now. So that's not normally the way that trajectory goes for players, and it did for him.
Yeah, because we always give Todd Haley a lot of credit here in Chiefs Kingdom. That's what we love to do. Derrick Johnson, some numbers that I think are fun. He played in 182 games for Kansas City. We kind of forget those 6 games he decided to play with the Raiders. Over 1,150 combined tackles.
That's crazy.
27 and a half sacks, 14 interceptions. Actually, the year you're talking about where he was benched, he had 3 interceptions that year, 2 touchdowns, and 175 yards returned. So dude was electric defensively. But yeah, I mean, he was everything. He was the green dot. He was the guy that we kept wanting other linebackers in Chiefs Kingdom to be, right? Like you look at Nick Bolton and we're still trying to say, how does he fit next to the Derrick Johnson comparisons? Like you don't say, or I should say, when you see Nick Bolton make a tackle, you're like, oh, that's Derrick Johnson. Like that's what why are you shaking your head?
Well, because I think Derrick Johnson's better.
Well, of course he is, but I'm saying that's what he reminds you. My point is like we're talking about him as a Chiefs legend. Like we're not saying, oh,
he's the bar. He's the bar.
Yes, he's the bar. He's the guy that you can like when you say that looked like Michael Jordan. I'm not saying that player is Michael Jordan. I'm saying that like that's what he was. Derrick Johnson was a superstar defensively, and he was there during some dark times here in Kansas City, and yet he was beloved. I have him the highest. Again, I have very fond memories because of just when I grew up. He was a guy I grew up just watching and idolizing. And he goes like, this guy is a bleeping badass, right? He was out there healthy most of the time. Every single game's like 12 tackles. Yep. Go ahead and just mark him down. I love DJ, man.
Yeah, why I was shaking my head is I agree with you, by the way. Against the run, he's a lot like Nick Bolton, but he's basically like if you combined Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquil. That's how good he was. And I think this is why it took him some time to develop. We can give Todd Haley some credit, or we could also say when you're expected to be an elite coverage linebacker and an elite run stopper, that's going to take some time. He was sort of a force of nature out of college. He won the Butkus, Nagurski, and Lambert trophies. He won all those awards. He ran a 4.5 40 for a linebacker, which is just blazing fast. Crazy. Top 15 pick out of UT. And then it took him a while. I think when he really had his heyday was probably like 2011 or so to 2016. That's when he kind of came into fruition as an all-around dominant linebacker. What impressed me the most about his tenure in Kansas City is he pops his Achilles in 2014. And then in 2015, he comes back and posts like off the charts PFF grades. This is just one example, but his coverage was an 80.9 and his run defense was an 87.5. So he was an overall 86.2 the year after an Achilles injury. When back then, Achilles injuries for a lot of players, not just in football, but basketball and other sports, they were kind of a death blow. They're not so much anymore. We're figuring out medically how to return from those things, but it was just a remarkable recovery, and it just shows the heart and determination of Derrick Johnson.
He was 33 years old that year, by the way. Like when he came back, it wasn't like he was tore his Achilles at 26 and came back at 27, which would be a great thing itself. There was some real longevity there, and then some exemplary, even late career heroics. He rode a nice streak there, but he still put up some really nice, it's longevity plus a zenith. And I think that's what gets you in the top 25 or so players in history.
I just wish he came along a few years later so he could have enjoyed the Mahomes era, more.
Oh, if it was him and not Anthony Hitchens and
Well, I was just gonna say, do you remember? I remember when we were trying to solve. Remember, DJ's gone. He goes to the Raiders, or even when he was beginning to fade, and it was just clear we were like flirting with it was like Damian Wilson's out there, and Hitchens the big signing, 9 years, 40 or 5 years, 45, 5 for 45, right? It was like
don't forget Reggie,
90 year. We reclaimed Reggie Ragland. We're just, we were trying for years to put something together in the second level of the defense. And it was not pretty at all. Unfortunately, there was still a lot of wins during those years, and Chris Jones making stuff happen up front, the secondary being strong. But man, that second level was a handicap for sure for a long time. And I think part of that was just the absence of DJ. You're going, oh my gosh, that guy did so much.
Yeah, that's what I think comes down to was I don't know how much people realized how much he did. We knew he was a green dot. We knew he was a great linebacker. But then you go, oh, wow, there is a gaping hole, not just in the run game, but also in pass coverage, everything. DJ was the engine. When the engine stopped, well, you just got a busted up car.
Can I ask you guys a question about, is the days of a DJ, is it gone? I mean, now that we have more specialty linebackers today, we've got Nick Bolton, we've got Tranquil, and we know they kind of mix and match, and maybe some guys can do a lot of it well, but we're not seeing anyone for the Chiefs, even though we talk about they have a ton of talent, but we're not talking about any one of them being this like super stud 3-down guy in the middle who's handling all of it all the time. And the Chiefs are loaded at linebacker. Like, are the days of a DJ gone?
Kind of. I think we have to be fair to Nick Bolton. The game is much more spread out now with the way receivers are utilized. There's a lot more motion. RPOs have made playing the linebacker position a nightmare. There wasn't just an occasional Michael Vick or Randall Cunningham. I would say something like half the league, quarterbacks have either average mobility or excellent mobility, which has just put these guys in a real bind. So again, similar to Budde versus Tooney, it's really hard to compare eras. I think this is probably the hardest era of all time to be a linebacker. I mean, who does it all in the NFL right now? Maybe Roquan Smith and Fred Warner, and that's the end of the list?
All right, number 23 on the list. Same era. Tamba Hali. Tamba Hali coming in at 23. Matt Connor, 25. I had him at 23. Patrick Allen, 26. Adam Best, 25. I'll start here with Tamba. Second all-time in team history with sacks, just behind Derrick Thomas. And he's still doing things with Kansas City right now. He's helping out FAU. He's helping out George Karlaftis. I mean, he bleeds Chiefs red. Like, this is a Chief through and through and then through some more. He cares about the organization so much. If he still had knees that worked right now, I would bet he would still be trying to play for Kansas City right now. Like, this dude loves football. He loves Kansas City, and he was just so damn good too. He wasn't the most athletic guy in the world, right? He was one of the first guys that I remember being like, it's the motor.
Yeah.
It's the work ethic. It's the fact that he came as a solid player. Again, there's a reason why he was drafted where he's drafted, but still, all of a sudden you're like, okay, he's first rounder, but he's not the prototypical J.J. Watt. He's not your super bendy athletic edge rusher. He worked on his craft, and he became an absolute beast. I got him. What do I have? I'm the highest, I think, at what was that now? I have Matt 23. Matt Connor, you have him second highest. Actually, you and Adam Best are tied at 25. I'll go with you first, Connor.
I remember very clearly the day the Chiefs drafted him, and they were talking about him coming out of Penn State, and those words, exactly what you just said, those were the words they exactly used. A nonstop motor that always led to more production than what you would think he would ever get. That he would clean up if he didn't get there the first time, that he would never just a classic play through the whistle guy. It's kind of a Karlaftis for me, right? This Big Ten product, a workman-like lunch pail guy, going to make good on he's got the talent, but it's the motor who's going to make him excel versus guys who maybe have a little bit more talent, a little bit better measurables, a little bit better metrics. And coaches are going to look at that guy every time and go, yep, the reps are here. It's Mike Dana. It's those kind of guys. So Tamba had the goods, of course, to get there. Second most sacks. I mean, if not for Derrick Thomas, we're talking about Tamba Hali as an all-time franchise legend, great in that way. I mean, fortunately, we had Derrick Thomas to watch because that was like a true all-time, maybe a Mount Rushmore defender. We'll talk about him later on in the series. So, I remember when they got him, and then he comes in the league, and he's just such a great civic leader, team leader. He's been a great ambassador for the franchise. The numbers are there. 33 forced fumbles in your career. I mean, every time we watch, he forced a fumble and it changes the momentum of the game. You're like, wow, to do that 33 times by one player means the ball's there, you're there, the opportunity. I mean, it's just kind of an alignment, a planetary alignment of sorts when that happens. And when it happens 33 times, something very special is going on for that player, or that player is very special. So Yeah, I love the guy. I always have, always will, and love seeing him working, on the sides and these short video snips that we get with Karlaftis, with FAU. I'm a big Tamba fan.
When you mentioned the name, we all smiled because I think when you talk about things like giving somebody's all to a franchise, a lot of times that's hyperbole or playing like their life depends on it. I think Tamba Hali squeezed more of his potential out of himself than any football player I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
I really think
well
that.
Said.
I mean, when we picked him, I was not happy with the pick. He was a guy that ran a 4.87. If you look at his relative athletic score in retrospect, it's like a 5 out of 10. And with someone who's coming up, that's going to be a crazy contrast to discuss. I don't want to spoil it yet. We'll get right to it. But he really squeezed every ounce out of himself. And if you want to talk about motor and sort of setting the stage for other Chiefs, I mean, he was the perfect mentor for George Karlaftis. Very similar players who just play their guts out, and both have kind of foreign roots. So I think there's an obvious kinship between those two guys. I just love Tamba Hali. I mean, 6-time Pro Bowler, had the big year in 2010 with 14 and a half sacks. And he just blew all my expectations out of the water from when he was picked 20th overall out of Penn State.
And what was crazy was he didn't have the easiest road in the NFL. He played, first off, some defensive tackle in college. And then you're now an edge rusher. Then you got to move to the other side when Jared Allen leaves. So now you went from the left to the right side. Now all of a sudden you get head coaching changes, defensive coordinator changes. So you're learning new playbooks. Then you go from a 4-3 edge to a 3-4 outside linebacker. Like, he was moving all around, had to learn different spots, and still found ways to put up numbers in all different scenarios and situations. That's just a man who adapts, and no matter what's going to happen, he goes, that's fine. I'll adapt and I'll put up numbers. I will make an impact no matter where you put me. And that is so damn impressive. Let's get into number 22. Number 22, Neil Smith. Matt Connor, you had him 31. I had him 22. Patrick Allen had him 27. Adam Best had him 17. A little bit of a disagreement here between Matt Connor and Best on where to put Neil Smith. We don't consider his Broncos days. I don't remember what happened. Like, he just left Kansas City and somehow he got rings, but I don't remember him ever playing in Denver. Like, that didn't happen. No, that couldn't happen. I will say it's great he's back here. He still does a lot of stuff, a lot of charity events. There's actually a golf event he does every single year here in Kansas City. He still is fond of the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll go with you, though, Adam Best, since you have him the highest at 17. Why 17 for Neil Smith?
If there's one player that I might be a little biased towards, it's him, because like you said, you grew up on Derrick Johnson. I very much grew up on Neil Smith. When I played football in high school and college, my celebration was the baseball swing because of Neil Smith. Just have always just idolized him. Had that Rush Hour poster. I don't know if you guys remember that. Just one of the greatest sports posters of all time. But we were talking about Tamba Hali's athleticism, and Neil Smith was a force of nature. 7'1" wingspan, runs a 4.5 40 as a defensive end. This guy's insane. His relative athletic score looking back is a 10. He was the best athlete to date at the time when he showed up in the NFL. I have to say, he was unbelievable as a Chief, but I think he left a little on the table. When you look at who he was, like coming out of college and those traits, you're really expecting almost a Hall of Fame trajectory, which I don't know if that's fair, but I don't know. And I was there when Derek Thomas made the Hall, and he was the one that introduced Derek Thomas. So just a special place in my heart, even though my last 2 years in high school, I had to watch this guy win rings with John Elway, which was like the ultimate sports gut punch in my life.
I will say, though, I feel like he should be in the Hall of Fame. He had 104 and a half sacks in his NFL career. I mean, I know we hate to say it, but he did win 2 Super Bowl rings as well. Part of me is surprised there hasn't been more talk for Neil Smith for the Hall of Fame. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm a little biased because, again, I also like Neil Smith a lot. But he also created a rule, the Neil Smith rule, because you used to be able to, as a defensive lineman, you could flinch. You could basically try and punk out offensive linemen. And he figured this out. You know how Deacon Jones had the head slap, and then all of a sudden they said you can't do the head slap anymore. Well, Neil Smith had the same thing without head slapping. Pre-snap, he'd go up and try and basically punk the offensive lineman. He goes, he would do it to rookie. I've talked to him multiple times about this because I think it's hilarious. He would just try and punk rookie offensive linemen, and then they would false start, be like, oh shit, it's Neil Smith coming. What am I going to do? And then eventually the NFL was like, yeah, Neil, you can't do that. You can't just be flinching. So there's actually a rule because he was getting so good at dominating players with what he did. They're like, yeah, the NFL said, we got to cut that out. You're too good at doing that. You're done. So if you have a own rule named after you, that's pretty damn impressive too.
I mean, I love Neil. It was amazing to me, I guess, thinking back. Like the Chiefs had him and Derrick Thomas on the same, like you just never have like two pillars like that. Like as much as we talk about like Chris Jones and someone today, they don't have that today. I mean, they've got like Chris Jones and some very good young players, sure. But in terms of like true cornerstone. And I mean, do you guys think about how much they helped each other? Like how much of that is in the works there? What would Neil Smith's numbers look like if Derrick wasn't around? What would Derrick's numbers look like if Neil wasn't around? I mean, part of me feels like that's like asking like, what if Paul and John? It's like, well, I mean, some groups just have two geniuses at work, and that, I mean, or let alone George for that matter. But you get what I'm saying. That defense was just like unfairly loaded. Neil on his own was in the top 5 defensive player of the year voting 2 times. I mean, he was well respected as an interior lineman around the league. Everyone knew how dangerous he was. So yeah, to me, he deserves that. I could have easily put him 10 spots higher. At some point you're like, what's 20 to what's 25 to what's 30. I mean, you're just trying to get all the greats listed. I don't know that I have a great reason for putting him 31 versus 21.
You mean 30? Yeah, you did have him 31. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I just think that's soft of you.
Neil, I love you.
He's never been a Hall of Fame semifinalist, which is just kind of mind-blowing to me. Yeah. Your question about whether Derrick and he helped one another, I think absolutely. Look at Chris Jones and how many cleanup sacks he's created for his teammates. Notably Frank Clark a lot of times in the playoffs, but then look at the Los Angeles Rams and Aaron Donald. Anybody they stuck on that defensive line, like Leonard Floyd, he's been struggling. Suddenly he's getting double-digit sacks. So yeah, I think they helped one another. I believe Derrick probably helped Neil more than Neil helped Derrick, just because Derrick is the better pass rusher. And that's not a slight on Neil Smith whatsoever. Just Derrick Thomas is a rare kind of generational talent.
Getting into number 21 of the top 50 Chiefs players of all time, Albert Lewis. Albert Lewis going to the secondary here. Matt Connor, 24. I had him at 24. Patrick Allen, 23. Adam Best, 23. This is crazy. The agreement that we all had. A man who had 38 interceptions as a Kansas City Chief. All right, I'll start with you, Connor. Albert Lewis.
I mean, he's one of the true greats. Small school guy out of Grambling State. One of the greatest pass defenders ever for this franchise. Obviously, we're all putting him in the top 25 players ever. Played at Grambling State, came out, 3rd round pick in the 1983 NFL draft, and then was around for a full decade. Made 4 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pros. He's a member of the Team Hall of Fame. I don't know if there's ever going to be a Pro Football Hall of Fame calling for him.
He was a finalist in 2023 for the first time.
Good. Okay. There's a good argument to be made there for sure. The hard thing for Albert is that the 80s, by and large, for the Chiefs were a completely forgettable time for the franchise. And we've said that about a couple other guys already. I'm glad that he also got into the 90s with them, and then he went on to play for a couple other teams too. I hate that a large part of his body of work is sort of couched in this ultra forgettable era, but he really was a man among boys in a lot of ways. in that secondary, a tremendous talent, a true ball hawk in every sense of the word, defining that word. So, I loved watching him and had to put him in my top 25.
I wish he was here with Spags. 6'2", 205, and ran a 4.38. I'm sorry. Good luck, everyone else. I mean, him and Spags together, you think L'Jarius Sneed is great? Like, L'Jarius Sneed's awesome. Phenomenal player. Imagine what Spags would do with Albert Lewis. It would be game over for defenses.
By the way, can I just say this? When we reference, like, Adam, you've brought up 40 times, and you just brought up Albert Lewis's 40 time. Like, you hire guys to help you train in the pre-draft season for 40 times. Like, how to shave off 100th of a second on your 40. Like guys today are so focused on that and able to, like, I'm going to save it for my pro day because I run faster there, or like that kind of thing. When we're referencing like over astounding 40 times from some of these guys who played in the 80s, 90s, or even 2000, I mean, that is way more impressive than guys today running a guy running a 4.3 today and Al Lewis running a 4.3 in 1983 is just a completely different scenario to me and deserves way more respect. Like, when we bring that up, that's why we're bringing it up.
I will also point out he had 20 interceptions in his first 4 years, and then teams were like, no, dude, we're done. We've tried throwing at Albert Lewis, and it ain't working. Why do we keep going that way? And so half the field is really shut down. Like, that's why I think it's so hard sometimes for secondary members to get a lot of this long time praise, right? Because you get interceptions early and then teams decide, well, we're not throwing at you. And so you're like, have they fallen off? What's going on? But in reality, it's because teams are so scared to throw to your side of the field, they're avoiding you. Teams avoided throwing the ball at Albert Lewis, and he still had 38 interceptions as a Chief.
Lewis Island, he also is the best kick blocker in franchise history. 11 block kicks in 11 seasons in Kansas City. Just an unreal statistic. I doubt that will ever be matched or even that anybody will come close, right? The other thing I want to point out here is just the Chiefs' good fortune in the third round. It's unbelievable that they got Will Shields and Jamal Charles and Travis Kelce and this guy all in the third round. They have to be in the conversation for best third round team in NFL history, I think. Left some people out too.
I'm trying to think of other third round picks that they've had.
Jim Tyrer.
Yeah. What do you guys think? I brought up the 80s thing. Do you think he'd be even higher on our list if it was like, played from 93 to 2003 instead of 83 to 93?
Yeah, 100%. And then if you put him in today's, if you did the same thing now, or if he did it from 1968 to 78, like, it sucks, but that's a huge part of the equation is how much did the team succeed as well. Now, cornerback is different than quarterback, obviously, but still, you get that boost. You're seeing guys right now currently playing the Chiefs who get that boost because you can always point to, well, they're winners. They have the rings. How much do they impact in this playoff game? If you're not playing in many playoff games, how many times do you have a chance to make an impact in the postseason? You don't.
Yeah, I just think as we talk about it, and as we talk about him, I'm just thinking, man, should I have put him in like top 15?
Well, just as a thought experiment, trade places with Emmett Thomas, trade places with Dale Carter. Those guys benefited from being on stronger teams just when they showed up. It's not his fault that he was drafted in 1983 and was stranded in the desert during the kind of worst period and arguably in team history.
Yeah. That's a very good point. This was the top 50 Chiefs of all time. This was number 25 through 21. Stay tuned as we finish our list to see who is top 5 for Adam Best, for Matt Connor. I am Sterling Holmes. Until next time, we are out.